Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and have we got a show for you? Thinking of the Veggie Tales there. I don't know why it just popped into my head. But anyway, we're here. We're not live today. If you're listening on the radio on, what would it be, Monday the 18th of December? Wow, just
18th.
7 days till Christmas on the radio. Now,
crazy.
If you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, you've got a few extra shopping days left, like 3 or 4. But anyway, we're not live on the radio, but you can call us with your questions on Thursday. If you're watching us on Facebook and YouTube, we've got the number there on the bottom of your screen. So call. Not right now, though, because every line is full. I love when that happens. But answering your questions today, we've got John Huang from Christ Point City Church in Huntington Beach, California. On the Bobby Cam, it's Bobby Conway from Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And on Skype, Phil Metzger from Calvary, San Diego. 3 great guys with hundreds of years of experience studying the Bible. Maybe not hundreds, maybe just a little over 100, or maybe right around 100.
Oh, I'm leaning on Bobby and Phil right now. So when you said that all the lines were filled up, it's because those two, they're thinking, John who? What?
No. Not John who what? John Huang. John Huang. All right. So Phil Metzger, haven't seen you in a few days. How are you?
Yeah, good. How you guys doing? Yeah, hey, Brian, you do have a VeggieTales voice. You could have been a great VeggieTale character, I think.
Is that a good thing? I don't. Is that a compliment?
No. I think that's a huge compliment. You have a great speaking presence voice. I can listen to your voice all the time.
What vegetable would he be?
Oh, that's a good question.
Just a vegetable. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, based on my skills at creating AI graphics, probably like a broccoli. I'm going to go with broccoli.
Oh, yeah. There he goes, making fun of my hair again. But yes.
I love your hair.
How about an eggplant?
Hey,
eggplant. Jay Nichols just suggested an eggplant.
This kind of thin gray hair, I'm jealous of that hair that you got, Brian Perez.
All right. Give us a call. If you're watching on Thursday, we'd love to chat with you. We're going to start our time on the phones with Malachi, calling from Corona, California. How you doing, Malachi?
Pretty good. How's it going, Pastors and Brian Perez?
We're doing well.
Radio host must be...
What was that?
On the planet.
I didn't catch what you said. I'm sorry.
I was saying, I wonder how it is being a radio host. It must be one of the best jobs on the planet.
It is. I'm very blessed to have been doing this for so long. And yes, thank you, Lord, for that. Phil Metzger, what's wrong with your camera? Hold on. Okay, I think you fixed it. Never mind. Okay, Malachi, what's your question?
Yeah, so my question is it's for a new believer. So I was wondering, what are some of the first steps for a new believer once they get saved?
Now, we know you're a believer. You've been a believer for at least a little while, right, Malachi? You're just asking in general?
Yeah, so a year. So the context is I go to one of the community colleges over here in Riverside, and one of the students was interested in, or like a new believer, and they were asking me, what are some of the first steps? And for me, I felt the Spirit told me to fast for 3 days and then to get back into a church. And so that was something I told him. But I was wondering if you guys had any other insights on what some of the first steps for a new believer should be.
Well, that's great that you guys are talking about Jesus there on campus. Phil Metzger, what do you say to Malachi?
Yeah, Malachi, I'm so glad you called in, and I'm so glad that this person has reached out to you like that. I think that you gave him advice to jump into a church is a great, really good idea. I want to extend this a little bit more, but I want to pull you into this, okay? Because I wonder, Malachi, if the very fact that this person was talking to you about it, what if it's that God wants to use you as a part of discipling this person? And what I mean by that is maybe God's going to help you to grow in your relationship with the Lord by also being a part of helping this friend in their relationship with the Lord. So rather than it just being, hey, you should go to church, what if you were to say, why don't you go to church with me? Let's go together. Let's get coffee together beforehand. Let's get a lunch afterwards and talk about the message afterwards. Do you have a Bible? Maybe you would be the person that would help him get a Bible and start read. Maybe instead of telling him where to read, what if you're to be a part of that and you were to say, hey, let's make a plan to get together and read through a book of, maybe a gospel story, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Let's learn about Jesus together. I think that there's a point where maybe, Malachi, you don't just want to tell him, here's the 5 steps you need to do. What if you're to walk those 5 steps with this friend? And what an encouragement that could be to them, and what also an encouragement that could be to you. I don't know if that makes any sense or helps you at all.
Oh, no, that helps me a lot. I didn't actually think of it like that. It does. It would help me in a major way. I think I would have liked to have that when I first got saved. To have somebody alongside me to walk it through.
Yep.
But for me to be that person would be amazing. That would be amazing.
And let me suggest something, Malachi. You don't become some kind of a guru who knows everything now just by doing that. Instead, we're all disciples of Jesus, right? We're all trying to grow and learn. So you get the joyful position of, like, when your friend says, what does this mean? And if you don't know the answer, guess what you do? You say, hey, I don't know either. Let's go talk to a pastor at the church that we're going to. Let's go call another friend. You don't ever have to be an expert. None of us are experts. We're all trying to learn and grow in our relationship with God. And you get to grow in the process. So don't ever feel like you're like a prisoner to, oh my gosh, I got to know what to say and what to do. Just enjoy the process of helping this person to walk closer with Jesus. And you're going to get to do that along the way.
And discipleship is so important, too. We're so focused sometimes, I think, on just leading people to Christ, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But we're also called to make disciples. But we get afraid. We're not going to have all the answers, like you mentioned, Phil, or I don't have time. I'm working 2 jobs. I'm married with children. How now am I going to make time for this new person in my life? How am I going to do this? John, what would you suggest?
Well, I agree with Phil. I think that this is a missing component for a lot of people that do come to Christ. I think that, there's a tendency to, have all these people in your life, in bringing people to Christ. But the moment that they receive Jesus, then all of a sudden it's like, all right, have fun. You guys are on your own now, and that's the last thing that should happen. Everything that Phil was talking about, it comes under the category of making disciples, and that's exactly what Jesus commanded us to do. And so, as Paul the Apostle said, as I received from others, I give to you. And so I just want to also encourage Malachi that if you're going to pour into a new believer, make sure that you also have people in your life that you can see as spiritual mentors. Not just the relationship between there's the pulpit and here's the pew, but hopefully you're connected with older, seasoned believers in Jesus. And so as you're constantly maintaining a humble heart as a learner, you're going to be filled up with gospel truth that you're going to be able to pass on to others. That is the story of Christianity. That's the story of how discipleship happens. And so a lot of these kinds of questions, Brian, like you were talking about, life questions are going to come up, and we need to have people in our lives that we can process this stuff with. But as long as we know that we are centered and rooted in God's truth, and we have that in the scriptures, and we've got people that model for us prayer, we have people that model for us Bible study, we have people that model for us consistency in our walks with Jesus on a daily basis, but not just church stuff. We need people in our lives that are going to model for us good Christian husbands, good Christian wives and moms and dads, and we need all of those relationships in our lives. And so I think that Phil handled that question the best way it could be handled, because I agree with you, Phil. I think that a lot of times people just give a list of things to do because our assumption is, hey, here's the list, now go out and do it. We need people in our lives.
For sure. Malachi, thanks for calling us today here on Pastor's Perspective. I was going to go to Richard, but he hung up. Call us back if you can, Richard. Instead, I'll go to Michael in Southern California. Go ahead, Michael. What's your question?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So I am very against divorce. I've been married for about 15 years, and in my heart of hearts, I do not want to go through a divorce. I have 2 teenage boys, but if I'm married to a person who is very, very verbally abusive, like really bad, and you just get to the point where you can't take it anymore, what are the options? Because I know the Bible says about adultery and things like that, but which has not happened as far as to my knowledge. So what is the limit that you actually are supposed to go through a really unhealthy environment? Like, I'm not even allowed to go to church. I can't tithe. I can't bring my kids to church. And just how much are you supposed to take before enough is enough?
Really quick question for you, Michael, before we go to Bobby Conway for his answer. Have you talked to somebody at your church about this yet?
I did, and it was a different Calvary Chapel, and their advice was you should if they said to me, if she wants to leave, definitely let her leave. But she doesn't want to leave. She just doesn't do anything. And so I'm literally like in a trapped environment. And that is what my church said. So they didn't give me a green light to leave. And so do I just have to stay in that environment that's really unhealthy and take it? I mean, it's bad. If I told you this, I can't even say what's said.
Yeah. Bobby, what would you tell Michael?
Yeah, Michael. Well, I'm very sorry. Boy, there are some tough marriages out there, and there would be several questions if I was with you right now. Is she a believer or not a believer? It doesn't sound like she's a believer. Does she work? Because one of the reasons that I could easily see her staying with you if she wasn't a believer is because of the security factor that maybe your income could bring. That's a possibility. So I'd be asking that. I'd also want to know, when did this start? Obviously, I wouldn't think go into a marriage if this was, evident beforehand. If so, you would have known what you were getting yourself into. I would want to know how old your wife is. And that is kind of a touchy issue, but I can say, and I mean this just from a pure data and study, and I think that all of you ladies out there that are listening, be tender toward me, but I'm just trying to help Michael out, and you would have to be very cautious on this, but this could be something hormonal depending upon her age. If, for example, is she starting to go through perimenopause? Some people have talked about this many times. Women have talked about this. My wife went through a horrific season of perimenopause where she wasn't herself. In fact, it felt like she just turned into something completely different. I didn't even recognize her. And she would just lose it on me. And we talk openly about this, so I'm not exposing her. She is an open book, and she would be the first to say how hard this season was for her hormonally, what she was going through. And it just made her angry. It made her frustrated. And so it was wreaking havoc on our marriage. We were having a hard time, and I didn't know how to be there for her, frankly. I was reacting to her. And once I started realizing, you know what, my wife is dealing with a lot of hormonal things. And so just as you would treat somebody with a mental health issue or whatever, you got to just kind of realize that she's going through a tough season, and that would just change. So if my wife was cutting me down or being harsh, it just allowed me to not take that as personal, to realize that she's in a tough season and that she could pull through that. So all that to say, it's very difficult to talk on this subject in a pastor's perspective kind of a thing, because when I'm asked a question about somebody's marriage, I end up having more questions than the question that's being asked me so that I could answer the question that the person wants answered. But in a nutshell, no. I mean, there's no room for divorce for verbal abuse. There's just no room for that. That's tough, right? I mean, it doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it's not easy. It's just going to mean, okay, here's what I can tell you, Michael. God can still work your sanctification even if your wife's sanctification doesn't seem to be at work. So, in other words, sometimes a spouse has to carry the cross of learning how to deepen their identity in Jesus and to become more secure in who Christ says they are, even though their spouse is tearing them down. And man, that is a tough cross to bear. But there are these moments where maybe what's happening is we all want to be respected by our wife, but if our wives aren't respecting us because of words, we can't leave them. But what we can do is go, God, help me to not be reactive. Help me to realize that my wife doesn't form my identity through her statements, that my identity has been declared upon me through Christ. Help me to not return insult for insult. Help me to respond in kindness. And what we begin to see when we're given that kind of cross to bear is how difficult the Christian life is to really live out. It is for me. Because if somebody insults me, I want to insult back. That is just, my flesh wants to meet the flesh. But the call of the Christian husband is to go above that, is to model that. And then what you hope to happen is you don't want to be a pushover, so you can put some boundaries up. You can talk about what respectable behavior looks like. I would encourage you to read Cloud and Townsend's book called Boundaries. Prayerfully consider what those boundaries look like. But then I would even invite your wife into the discussion. Like, do you think it's acceptable to talk like this to me? And hopefully she'd say, no, I just do, and I get triggered. Okay, well then what kind of boundaries should we agree on? So it's not you coming at her with the boundaries, it's trying to invite her into the process of that. Those are just a few things that I'm sharing. And man, I feel like I'm just getting started, but I don't want to hog up the time because I've got some really wise sages that could jump into the mix here.
Wise sage number 1, Phil Metzger. What do you say?
Oh, I won't take that title. I think Bobby, well done, as best as can be done. Michael, the question that you're asking, unfortunately, for where we're sitting in this is almost impossible for us to really answer. As you heard from Bobby, there's so many questions that we would have to ask. I even want to go a step further, and this is not specific to you, Michael. I'm not saying this about you, but I want you to understand the situation that we have to deal with on this. And that is, we don't know that what you're telling us is true either. And so it's so hard to say, hey, here's some advice based on what you're saying, because we don't know that this is exactly happening to you. Again, I'm saying this not to say that against you, Michael, specifically, but for all people listening or watching to understand that a true, what you're needing is to sit down with a good counselor, pastoral, Christian, whoever it is, who can really get into understanding your family dynamic as much as is possible. Because what if I were to find out, and again, I don't say this about you and specifically, but what if I found out that you've been the one that was abusive, right? So where does that put me in this conversation? There's no way for us to really answer well. Bobby did as best as a person can with the information we have. And I just think we're really sorry for the situation you're in. I do believe you, of course, and I believe that you have great intentions in wanting to get God's advice on that. Unfortunately, I think you need to sit down with either pastoral counselor, marriage Christian counselor, who can dive into this deeper and deeper and deeper to help you guys.
All right. Wise sage number 1, John Huang. Phil Metzger didn't want that title, so we're going to give it to you.
I'm going to give it back to Phil.
Okay.
The only thing I can add is just to say I am in agreement with my two brothers here. For people that know me here at Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa, when people have come to me and wanted to talk about their marriage, when after the service they would come up for prayer, and it's generally one spouse coming up to want to talk about the other spouse. My response has been pretty consistent. This is a conversation I can't walk into unless I'm with the two of you guys, because I need to hear. I need to hear from both of you, because I have heard stories where the husband has been very reactive to a very angry wife, similar to, what this caller is describing, and it solicits a reaction when you hear something like that. But then at the same time, I've also heard from the wife's perspective that explosion of rage is really fueled out of either fear or deep hurt. And so, all of a sudden, when you realize that that's what is fueling the rage, then all of a sudden it's like you want to take a step back and say, okay, that puts everything in a completely different light. And so now we need to address the fear. Now we need to address the deep hurt. And then, like what Bobby said, there have also been issues where, there's been situations with like thyroid issues, and so then that puts things into a different light. And so I mean, really, all I'm doing is just reiterating what these guys said. I mean, that really is a really hard thing for us on the radio to be able to respond to, except that, this is where I hope that you don't grow bitter against the church, or don't grow bitter against people that you're hoping to get a particular answer from. But I hope it causes you to press further in, to surround yourself with good spiritual counselors and people that could help walk you through all of this. But hopefully it's like, as much as we want to see you thrive, we also want to see your wife thrive too. Mm-hmm. Whatever that thing is that your wife is dealing with, we hope that she would also find peace in her restless soul, because that rage is coming from somewhere. And I think about how in Genesis it says, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. It was the chaotic waters. And then God said, let there be light. And he brought creation out of chaos. And we pray that for you in your marriage.
For sure. I want to go back to Bobby Conway, but first I did a really quick search on the Focus on the Family website, which is, one of the websites we often recommend here on the program, focusonthefamily.com. I did a search for menopause, and there was an article there that you might want to read, Michael. Again, we're not trying to diagnose what's going on with your wife or anything. No. This may not be the case at all, but could be something you might want to read. It's just an article called What Husbands Need to Know About Menopause. But Bobby Conway, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is really sad, right? I mean, think about how many people have got divorced during a woman's season of menopause. And had they understood what was going on, it could have changed the dynamic some. It wouldn't have made it easy. It was still hard, but it would maybe have equipped the husband to know how to help carry that burden that his wife's going through. What John said is exactly right, and that's what I wanted to allude to. He said, this is coming from somewhere. And so obviously there's anger behind verbal abuse. So if she was given a platform to talk, why is she feeling angry? And again, Michael, we're just speaking out of a vacuum here. Like we're so thankful you called, and you take what applies to your situation and throw the rest off. But sometimes people ask a question, and we know that there's other couples out there that need to hear some of this stuff too. So anything that we say that doesn't sit well, don't think that we understand your situation, as Phil so aptly put. But I would want to really ask, what's behind the anger? Why am I triggering my wife? Is there any validity to this? Does she feel neglected? Does she feel that her needs aren't cared for? Does she feel like I'm consumed in another direction? So anytime there ever is a divorce, there's always two parts that can contribute on some level. Even in the most rough times, you can find people who go through something where, maybe somebody went through a divorce. They can go, you know what, I could have did this better. And that's only because we can all do things better. No, I mean, like in every marriage that's not divorce, you have two people that are at fault for not being even closer than they ought to be. It's just the nature of humanity, right? We all bring stuff to the table. So I really would say, I think that the solution is going to be maybe not what you want to hear, but it might be the very thing that Jesus invites you into, that he sees fit for deeper sanctification, modeling. Hey, like if you're talking to the kids, hey guys, mom's obviously been struggling with a lot, but you know what? Just pray for dad, because I want to love her unconditionally, and I want to model that kind of love before you as your old man. I want to show you what it looks like, how to love and how to engage this. And, and it gets tough, but I want you to, because the picture of marriage is one in which, the husband is laying down his life for his bride. It's a picture of Christ's love for the church. And that picture is one of unconditional love. Now, none of us live up to that picture. I blew it last week, for crying out loud. I mean, my wife and I've had a rough patch we've had a winter season. Marriage goes through seasons: winter, spring, summer, fall. I would say my wife and I are trying to figure out how to get out of the winter. We've been in the winter lately. And, and I hate being in a winter season. But a marriage that doesn't go through some winter seasons, man, that's a really fortunate situation. But I think we just ebb and flow sometimes, and you got to renegotiate how to treat each other, and you got to remember what you got into to begin with. And, we got to realize what of winter did I bring to the table, and do some repentance, and then go into the spring. And you know what? My wife and I we've been married 27 years today, and we've had more than 27 seasons of winter in 27 years. And we've had a lot of beautiful spring seasons as well. And there have been lots of times where my wife and I, if it wasn't for Jesus, if it wasn't for Jesus, we would not be married. But the gospel provides us a worldview. It puts me back in place and says, you know what? I made some vows, and I'm called to forgive, and I'm called to love. And Jesus said, forgive 7 times 70. He didn't say, hey, you know what? If she's jacked you up this many times, you can throw in the towel. He gave the reason for an out if there's been adultery. And so, or if you're married to a non-believer that decides to leave, we see with Paul's writing. So those are just some extra words of encouragement.
Michael, thanks for calling in today on Pastor's Perspective. We're all praying for you and your family, and yeah, that must be tough. Let's go to Rick, listening on the K-Wave app in Grand Terrace, California. Hi there, Rick.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much for taking my call. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
What took you so long to call?
Right, exactly. Quick question. I have a son. He's 28 years old. Just recently, him and I kind of going back and forth with everything going on with Israel and so forth, and kind of called me out and said that don't be careful, Dad. Don't be too Zionistic, and because I support Israel. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I recently found out he converted to Muslim, and the way I found out, just to give you some context, is one of my daughters that lives in LA sent me an Instagram video of him in a mosque reciting the prayer to become a Muslim. So I haven't spoke with him yet, and I just wanted your guys' perspective, how to approach him. He was raised, up in the church, raised in a Christian home, and really never saw the fruit of him ever giving his life to the Lord, walking with the Lord, but always just kind of, bucking against it throughout the years. So.
Wow. Well, we're about to go to our break. There's no way we can answer this question in 20 seconds, so we will get some answers from the guys, Bobby Conway, Phil Metzger, and John Huang, when we come back from the break here on Pastor's Perspective. So Rick, stay on the phone. Everyone else on hold, hang on. We'll get to you guys in the second half of the program. If you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube on Thursday afternoon, the 14th of December, give us a call. We've got an open line right now. Maybe you can grab it and ask your question of Bobby, Phil, or John. The number is right there on the bottom of your screen. If you're listening on the radio on Monday the 18th or at any other time on the radio, we're not live. We are here Tuesday through Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time until 5 o'clock on Thursday. And we welcome you to call us back when we are live. But hold on a little bit. We're going to get to Rick's question and everyone else's as well. Stand by. This is Pastor's Perspective. We're back on this pre-recorded episode of Pastor's Perspective. We recorded it on the 14th of December. If you are watching us live on Facebook or YouTube right now, and it's not yet 5 p.m. Pacific time, you can call us, ask us your questions. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen. If you're listening on the radio, some other date, we're not live today, so write down your question and then you can call us tomorrow. I'm here with Bobby Conway, John Huang, and Phil Metzger. We were talking to Rick. Are you still on the phone, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, so Rick is still there. He told us the story of his son growing up in a Christ-centered home, going to church and everything, and then he grew up, joined the army, and has just recently converted to Islam. And, you know, Rick's wondering, what do I do? Any advice, John? What would you say?
Well, I think this is going to take all of us to speak into this, which I'm actually thankful that these guys are here with me. I'll just start by saying, number one, you know, for you and your wife, the both of you really need to press into the Lord for you personally, and make sure that you guys are trusting in the Lord and leaning on the Lord and allowing the Lord to hold on to you, because there's going to come some moments as parents that, because we feel this so deeply, that sometimes we just feel like our knees are buckling and our flooring is just being removed from beneath us. And you need to know that Jesus is a sure, solid rock, a foundation, and just press into him and have him hold on to you. You know, the Bible talks about bearing one another's burdens, and in doing that, to make sure that our hearts and our lives are anchored deeply in the Lord himself. And then secondly, with your son, this is where you're going to need the Lord's wisdom, guidance, and strength to walk with him on his faith journey. My suspicion is, with everything that he's been exposed to growing up, and then whatever his exposure was while he was in the Army, that there are things that appeal to him either on an intellectual level or an emotional level. And so, you know, being recently converted to Islam, I mean, he's going to be processing a lot of stuff. I mean, everything right now seems fresh and concrete and sure to him. But just like anybody in any form of faith, there are going to be challenges. There's going to be doubts that creep in, and people are going to have to work through those doubts. And my concern is when parents give up on their kids early, that when those doubts come, those parents aren't going to be there to be able to speak into them when they're having to work through those theological and emotional crises. And so you want to make sure that your love for him remains constant, the same way that God hasn't given up on your son either. God loves your son, and his love for him hasn't grown any less. He loves him, and so we need to be able to love our kids that way. But then at the same time, rather than trying to give him all of your answers, take the time to listen. Give him space to be able to explain his, how he got to where he was. Let him tell you his story and how he got there. And I think that one of the things, and I'm glad that Bobby's here, because one of the things I really appreciated about Bobby in answering questions like this in the past is he talks about being able to present all the different worldviews side by side, and asking the questions like which religion or which worldview has the best answers, and so I think that these are moments for you to be educated in Islam, and to be educated in knowing what their fundamental beliefs are. And at the same time, in conversation, as you listen to your son's stories, to be able to ask those questions and to present these clear presentations of the gospel, not to force him into anything, but to say, all right, let's think through some of these things. Which religion has the best answers on this? And Bobby could definitely do better on that. But I would just say, as a parent, all of us here are parents, and this would just be something huge, heavy on our hearts. But man, aren't you so thankful that the Lord hasn't given up on your son? The Lord is. He's on the move, especially when we can't see it, and God will do what He needs to do to bring your son home.
Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, that was a great answer, John. As I was listening, you really kept the focus on the relationship, and I think that's going to be crucial. I would say, Rick, don't take this personal when you're talking to him, because that's it's so easy as mom and dads to feel like we've failed. Mm-hmm. He's been out on his own. He's an adult. So just try not to take it personal, and also realize while you can recognize that he went into a religion that you don't believe in, from his heart and from his posture, he thinks he's being sincere. And so talk to him like that, like, hey, I know you believe what you're doing. I know you're trying to be sincere here. I know you're thinking you thought it out. And then, like John said, asking a lot of questions about what didn't appeal with Christianity and why did Islam begin to make sense? What about Islam attracts him to Allah? And then, depending upon what he knows, where John talked about, kind of getting buffed up a little bit on Islamic theology, be prepared for him to have been introduced to the works of Bart Ehrman, who wrote Misquoting Jesus and a number of other works. And Ehrman is an apostate, and he's a internationally famous New Testament scholar who teaches at UNC Chapel Hill. And many people have just got theologically undressed by him because they didn't know how to defend their faith. But interestingly enough, though he's an agnostic, Muslims use his work to challenge Christians. And so then what Christians end up dealing with is Bart Ehrman, an agnostic New Testament scholar, and the Muslim. And it becomes overwhelming to the Christian. And so this will be arguments about why the Gospels aren't historically reliable, why Jesus didn't rise from the dead, all the potential and apparent discrepancies, which he would say are actual discrepancies in the New Testament. So I would say be prepared for your son to come at you with some of those things, because that's very likely stuff that was used to help to enable him to walk away, to think that Christianity wasn't true, and that Islam is the more revealed belief system. Those are just a few things that I would share as well.
Phil Metzger.
Yeah, all really, really good stuff. I guess I'm reiterating the same over and over. Maybe it's good to hear it a few times, though. Holding relationship with your kids as adults is more important than being right. Holding relationship, because you may not be the only person. You may not be the person that the Lord uses to help kind of steer them in the long run. And I don't mean that against you. I'm just saying God's ways are so much bigger than like just ours. When our kids are 4, we are their world. But when they're 28, they're in the world. And so I just want to remind you that hold relationship with your son. You guys might disagree. Hopefully you have the kind of relationship where you could even say those words. Yep, we disagree on this. I want to learn. I want to understand. But yeah, we disagree. And that's okay. That's where we're at right now. I'd also like something you said earlier, and it could just be, maybe I'm off. I just want to make sure that you get clarity for yourself, that it didn't sound to me like you have yet had a conversation with your son that he's converted to Islam, but that it was through a post that you had seen that he was praying the Muslim prayers. I think it would be really, really, really important, if we're going to step this whole thing back, is that you just have a conversation about that before, the assumption he's definitely, that's where he's at. Let him tell you himself, where is he at and why is he there? And then everything else that all the guys said, just really good stuff.
Rick, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. Remember that we archive all of our episodes on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify if you want to go back and listen, or anybody out there maybe in a similar situation. We've got our archives that go back several years that you can check out online. Okay, let's go to San Bernardino, California. Here is Artenise. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you guys doing today?
Doing well. I'm hearing a little bit of static on your phone line, so let's get right to your question as soon as we can.
Okay, because, my phone is acting crazy. But anyway, it's unfortunate. I have a friend who is a Christian woman. She's an elder woman, and she's been married for a very long time to her husband, who recently passed away. And we were talking, and, the scripture came up about a sanctified wife sanctifying her husband.
Yeah.
And I tried to share a little insight that, you got to take it in context, because he was talking about marriage and relationship, intimate relationship, and children being born out of that relationship, and that if that husband or that wife decides that they want to stay in that marriage and love that person, that they shouldn't leave just because one is a Christian and one is not.
Yeah. So, John, what does that passage in Scripture mean?
Yeah, gosh, with all of our hearts, we wish we could say that would be the case, that the husband is with the Lord, but what the Bible clearly teaches us is that each person has to decide what they are going to do with the person of Jesus. And Jesus himself declared to be the only way, the truth, and the life. And those who believe in him, those who come to the Father through him, those are the ones that are saved. Now, in this case, when Paul is talking about the holiness of the spouse or the children, it's important for us to understand that the word holy it talks about being set apart. And so there's a couple of ways to understand it in this context. Number one, because of the relationship with one of the members that is a covenant child of God, that there is special attention that God has on that family. So in that, the unbelievers benefit from that the Lord actually has special care on the family for the sake of that one family member that is a believer. Another way to understand it is that this set-apart relationship makes this family distinct from the pagans around them. Remember, Paul is writing to the Corinthians living in a very sensual, idolatrous culture. And so within a Christian home, that unbeliever would be set apart in a home where at least one family member is introducing in the household not polytheism but monotheism, not a worldly pagan idolatry culture, but a Christian culture. And that's why Paul said that if an unbeliever is willing to stay, let him remain. But if that unbeliever chooses to leave that family environment, then let that person go. Because in that time and culture, not every pagan would have the ability to remain in a house like that. But in that case, that house would be a set-apart family unit. But it has nothing to do with if a person by default is married to a believer, that they all of a sudden have salvation that is just been given to them automatically. Every person needs to decide what are they going to do with the person of Jesus. And the beautiful thing is God made a way for people to come into a right relationship with him, and that is by believing the gospel, by faith in Jesus.
Artenise, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Dee, who's listening on AM 1110 in Los Angeles. Welcome to the program, Dee. We've only got a few minutes left, so get right to your question.
Yes. Good evening. What do you think about me thinking about Adam coming after man and female, male and female, period?
Wait, what do we think of what? Say it again.
I think Adam came after male and female.
So you think God created male and female and then he created Adam?
I think God created male and female, and then I think Lord God created Adam.
Okay. Bobby, we'll give this one to you.
Well, obviously Adam, just means man, Ish and Isha, representing female. But, when God says that he created man, he's talking about mankind, and then he created them male and female. But we don't see that there's a population in place before Adam and Eve. Now, if you've been influenced perhaps maybe by evolution, there are those who are theistic evolutionists that would say that there were different types of, beings that were humanoids that were alive before Adam and Eve, but Adam and Eve were the first pair whom God stamped with the Imago Dei, the image of God. So those that preceded Adam and Eve didn't have the image of God, but they were humans, but basically humans that were bereft of a soul, so to speak. And they were just working out according to natural selection, and they evolved over millions of years, and they were the offspring of the apes. I don't think that there's a lot of stock to be put in that particular interpretation. I think that if we're looking at the Bible, if you're not an evolutionist, but you're just coming at the Bible, then I would say run as fast as you can from that interpretation, because that it's very, it's not an interpretation that you really even see within scholarship. So I know something about myself is I would not want to have a view that is not even one of the main views. I'd think, well, man, I must have missed it somewhere because I'm not that smart. So that's my encouragement to you. I think that it seems really clear to me that Adam and Eve were the first, humans that were created. But if you are a theistic evolutionist, I understand your position. And on that, I would say that is a position that, John Collins and I think Timothy Keller leaned toward theistic evolution. I know he went through a scandal, but the late Ravi Zacharias, I think, leaned that way. So, Benjamin Warfield. So that's not a unique theory, but that's what I would say.
All right, Dee, thank you for calling us today, and thank you for listening on K-Wave 107.9's simulcast on AM 1110 in the greater Los Angeles area. Now let's go to Dallas, Texas. Here's Chris. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, last time I told you guys about Pastor's Perspective out in Iowa. Actually, it's the title out there. It's the program is called...
Oh, yes. That's right. Yes, that does make sense now because, it wasn't an Iowa program. But you had a question about aliens. Let's get right to your question because we're running out of time.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, mother half, she goes off and she believes in aliens. And I go, what? And then, because there's UFOs, even the government right now, they're on the news that you hear about it, blah, 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 and all this and all that. And I'm like, to be honest with you, I don't believe it. I mean, it's only one Earth, and God created the people on the Earth, and then he has his people, the Israel people. And then, and I go, why would God make another Earth out there and it being Martians and flying all over the place and not even presenting themselves? And what about the Roswell, the one alien they got that, or over there at the in Utah area, what is it called, the Area 51,
Mm-hmm.
what have you? And I'm like, I go, I don't believe in it. I think the devil himself is trying to mimic, like Elijah when he was taken up. He's trying to mimic and trying to get us, people, to believe in nonsense.
Okay. Phil Metzger, aliens, yes or no?
If it was only that simple, right? If we could just say yes or no.
Yeah.
Honestly, I got no idea what's really going on out there, if I'm really honest. But I do know this, I know these things serve as massive distractors from meaningful conversation. So I don't know, like, if somebody wants to, pull me into like, what about this and this and this? And at this point in life, I'm kind of like, that's really interesting. Cool. And it kind of diffuses those things so we could get to the things that like really matter. I know you're asking like, do aliens exist and all that? Well, I guess it depends on how you see, like, are angels aliens? Are, what is an alien? What does that constitute? My perspective on that is like, the world is a lot more mysterious than we realize. I'm just going to say that. But I also think that like Jesus has centered his attention, his redemptive work on humanity, all humanity, Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, theistic, evolutionist, all of us, American, Ethiopian. God centered his redemptive work on the historic human being. But I also think that the world is a cool, beautiful, wild, crazy thing that God's created. And it's really fun how insane it is. Do I think that people use the concept of aliens to sidetrack from a conversation about Jesus? Yes, 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 all the time. And that is always demonic. Anything that takes away from Jesus is demonic, whether it be my music, my sports, my whatever. So I think I want to be centered in Christ, but I don't spend a lot of time. I saw those like news things on the thing. It's super fun it's fun to watch and just go, oh wow, maybe there is an ET. I loved ET growing up. I'll just take it there. But are there aliens? I got no idea. I'll be real. I teach the Bible. I have no clue about the rest of that stuff.
Now, John Huang, does John 3:16, for God so loved the worlds, plural? Are there little people on other planets somewhere?
It says he loved the world, and talking about the world of humanity. But I will say this, and I believe it's either the King James or the New King James that does use the word alien, but not speaking about extraterrestrials the way we think about it. But for us as believers, as foreigners, aliens, whose citizenship is in heaven. So I know that might seem like a cop-out answer, but I will just say that as citizens of God's kingdom, we are to live in a way that is distinct from the system of this world that is ruled and governed by Satan. And the people should be able to look at each of us as followers of Jesus and see people that are ambassadors of a king and his kingdom. And in that way, we are alien. But it's also interesting in 1 John 3:1, where it says, behold what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us. That idea of the quality of God's love, what manner, the idea is how strange, how otherworldly, how alien, if you will. In other words, there is no love in this broken, fallen world that compares to the love that God has for the world. And so I'll take alien that way. And and then Bobby can talk to ET and phone home and do all sorts of stuff. And so that's my answer.
Oh man, yeah.
Bobby, what say you?
Bobby, yeah. Well, I do think that this stuff can be a distraction because there's no way that we can, just prove one way or the other. The Bible just doesn't speak to that. So then the question becomes, okay, I mean, in a universe so massive, I mean, the person who says, well, no, the person who's like really says, no, Bobby, they don't exist. Okay, but then if I was to say, well, then how do you know? Like, you haven't been to every stretch of the corner of the entire universe, and the Bible didn't speak about that. So the person could be dogmatic with me, but and the person could think that he knows, but then I would say, but then there's other people that think they do know. And so I'd say to that person, you don't know either. Do I think that aliens exist out there? No. I don't think that aliens exist out there, but here's the deal. If somebody believed that aliens could not exist, and then if it was shown that an alien did exist, that they would be hiding out under, a conspiracy with the government, then the person's Christianity would be a house of cards and fall apart. And for me, I wouldn't walk away from my faith, and I wouldn't think it would mess up my understanding of the Bible. If I found out aliens exist, I would just realize that, you know what, who am I to, there's so much I can't understand about the earth, which is just one small planet, who am I to think that God, why would I feel so entitled to understand the workings of the greater universe? And why would I think just because God gave me the gift of life on earth that other species couldn't have the gift of life elsewhere? So I would have to figure out how to, apply my biblical worldview in that context. And thankfully, I don't have to worry about that now. But I just don't think you can prove it one way or another.
All right, Chris, thank you for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. And thank you for watching us today on Facebook and YouTube. If you're watching us online right now, what do you think of the flowers in my hair? That's actually the way we have the studio decorated for Christmas. And it looks like I have a hibiscus or something in my hair, but it's a poinsettia. Anyway, and John Huang, what are you over there doing?
He's got a wreath.
I'm fixing
He's got a wreath. He's fixing his wreath.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time. God bless you guys. Talk to you tomorrow. Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.